Does your friend know that she's going to be competing against a young man? My son says, friend, you are running against a boy. And she goes, oh. And she says, well, his times aren't great. Hopefully I can beat him. And he said, this is wrong. You shouldn't have to hope you can beat him. You shouldn't be competing against him. And she said, this is just the way things are. And that statement hit me as a female, as a woman. That's just the way things are. I start thinking about the 30s, 40s, 50s, when women were being violated. I remember saying something to my grandmother, why didn't anyone go to the police? And she goes, it was just the way things were. And I thought, we're taking steps backwards.
Last week, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a landmark case that, ironically, really ought not to be a landmark case because, quite frankly, for all of history, the premise would have seemed like common sense, at least until about 37 seconds ago. That is to say, whether or not biological boys should be allowed to play in girls' sports, simply because they feel like a girl. In other words, they self-identify as a girl. Now, I think it's fair to say that for many of us, the Biden era felt like we were living in an alternate universe, one where the inmates were running the prison, or perhaps more accurately, where the patients were running the insane asylum. Activists have weaponized kindness and empathy for a tiny minority with serious mental health struggles. They've weaponized this as a tool to hijack our basic biology terms, to the point that the Supreme Court justices can't define what a woman is, and doctors are now claiming that if you ask if a man can get pregnant, well, that is a political ploy. But in a postmodern relativistic world, there are things that are not relative. They're not your truth, they're not my truth, they are simply the truth. And at Moms for Liberty, well, we stand for truth. That is our number one core value. I recently saw a post on Facebook that stated it well. There are some things that are simply true, not rhetorically true or politically contingent, but true in the way that gravity is true. The sun rises and sets. Hot and cold describe real physical states. Water is wet. And male and female are biologically distinct categories of human beings. Those truths can be subdivided endlessly, refined into edge cases and rare conditions. But refinement does not negate reality any more than twilight abolishes the distinction between day and night. Exceptions do not dissolve categories. They presuppose them. Defining a woman should not even be as hard as knowing what the definition of is. And if you know, you know. In June 2025, last year, the U.S. Department of Education recognized June as Title IX month. And at M4L Academy, we had a special event where we heard from some incredibly brave women who have been fighting against the slippery slope of allowing self-ID for years. Today's video features Nicole Young, the chapter chair from Placer County, California. California is definitely one of the places California is most definitely on the front lines of the culture war. And Nicole is fearlessly fighting to preserve America, liberty, and what is true. We have a link to the full presentation in the description, but for now, welcome back to class.
Nicole Young is a mother of 6 and the Placer County chapter chair for Moms for Liberty. She became an accidental activist after confronting challenges in California's school system. Her courageous journey from navigating education as a parent to testifying at the state capitol has made her a powerful advocate for academic excellence and parental rights. In addition to her state-level advocacy, she actively collaborates with local school board trustees, offering insight and support in the development of policies that prioritize academic achievement, amazing, parental rights, and student success. Her dedication to education reform and community engagement continues to drive her efforts to create meaningful change in California's education system. I am really excited to welcome today Nicole Young.
Hi.
Hey there.
Okay. So my own experience, so I do have 6 children, and I don't want to say I didn't pay attention. I became aware of children being transitioned probably in 2016, and I thought it was just isolated, and I really didn't dive into it. Fast forward to now, I have a son who runs track, and right now the sports issue is huge. Like we're garnering a lot of attention to this issue
Mhm.
because of athletics, and especially in California. Like Joey said, California is ground zero. We're where all of this starts and originates for a lot of things. I only have 10 minutes, so I won't dive into everything. But my son was set to run in a qualifying meet for state. And it came to my attention that there was going to be a male running in the girls category. And he was running against one of my son's teammates. So I said, does your friend know that she's going to be competing against a young man? And he said, no. And he was rightfully, I myself have spoken a lot to my kids about this. We don't play pretend with people because it's just not nice, and it's not safe. So my son goes to friend and says, friend, you are running against a boy. And she goes, oh. And she looks and she says, well, his times aren't great. Hopefully I can beat him. And he said, this is wrong. You shouldn't have to hope you can beat him. You shouldn't be competing against him. And she said, this is just the way things are. And that statement hit me as a female, as a woman. That's just the way things are. And I start thinking about, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, when women were being violated and nobody would go to the police because it wasn't going to be, you weren't going to be taken seriously. You were going to be asked what you were wearing. And I remember saying something to my grandmother, like, why didn't anyone go to the police? And she goes, it was just the way things were. And I thought, we're taking huge steps backwards. And to be this 16-year-old girl says, this is just the way things are now. And I thought, oh, she doesn't think she has a voice. She doesn't think she's going to be listened to. She's going to be ostracized. She's going to be called names. She knows that this is a battle she is not going to win. And I thought, why really should this young woman be fighting this battle? This is the battle for us right now. And because they are targeting our children, they are slowly and surely, by the introduction of social emotional learning, um, comprehensive sex education, they are telling our children that people can magically become the opposite sex if they so desire to do it. And for our young girls especially, I see their voices being stifled. You don't like a boy in the changing room, you're the problem. Go change somewhere else. You don't want to race against a boy, too bad. They'll win, you lose. And it is an issue of fairness, but we also forget about women having a voice and women feeling safe. And when we tell a young girl to ignore that that feeling in the pit of her stomach, that intuition that keeps her safe, to allow a male into her sports or into her spaces, we're teaching them to be less safe. We are teaching them that those safety signals that we have inside of us don't really matter, because a man has every right to violate your space and your sports, and you need to find a different path. And I don't like that, and I don't like it at all. And the way, in our legislature, we are a deep blue supermajority, and so we have legislated a lot of this into law. It's since 2014 men been able to self-identify into bathrooms, changing rooms, locker rooms, sports teams. And it starts off as young as kindergarten. And, we're reading books to these little kindergartners, I Am Jazz, and kids are thinking, well, what if one day I decide, what if one day I accidentally turn into the opposite sex? And there's also in this schooling and this legislation, we are changing language. We are changing language to fit this agenda. And it's really unfortunate that we are we are just completely ignoring reality to appease, like Joey said, a men's rights movements. And the gender ideology, gender woo, whatever you want to call it, has seeped into every aspect of California life. It almost seems like you can't escape it. Right now, there's a bill coming through where you can't say pregnant woman. You'll get a fine. You have to say pregnant people. Person with the cervix, person with the
That just that passed?
It passed last session. The governor
Oh,
signed it into law. And again, well, we're just trying to be nice. We're trying to be kind. We're trying to be polite. And I think with women, a lot of us were raised like, well, you have to be nice. You need to be kind. That seems more important than standing up for truth. Except that it's not nice. It's not nice to women. It's not nice to children. We are enforcing that women don't have a voice and that our children should, under the guise of being kind, distort and ignore reality. And, you know, when you stand up or when you say anything against this contagion agenda, whatever, you get called all kinds of names: bigot, Nazi, transphobe, homophobe, any name they can think of. And that's okay, because being honest and standing for reality and making sure our kids can grow up with an intact sense of reality and noticing and being able to recognize and respect that men and women are different, and that we don't have to fit in rigid sex stereotypes. And we have to stop this. We have to stop electing people who can't recognize basic biology, that men are men, women are women, and that is the end. We're not changing language. We're not punishing children for
oh no.
seeing that that is not a girl, that is a boy, and then trying to legislate women out of existence.
I agree. That is absolutely, I think that you hit the nut on the head right there, or the nail on the head, with the just not electing people into legislature that are not able or willing to acknowledge basic biological truths. That definitely will probably help us, I would say. You make a really interesting point. I just want to highlight how, but us doing this, and it, I think a lot of people know this theoretically, but it's the actual statement of it that's so important, articulating it, that we're not allowing children, or we're teaching children to not trust yourself, your instincts, that when something is wrong, you shouldn't trust that anymore. And that's really a destabilizing concept that really undermines truth, because we do want our kids to be able to know and trust their gut when there's something wrong. Thank you so much for talking about that.
The inevitable conclusion of allowing self-ID is the erasure of women. And Moms for Liberty has been fearlessly sounding the alarm to this point for years. When the government first tried to rewrite Title IX protections to include gender identity, Moms for Liberty succeeded in halting the Biden administration's attempts through a lawsuit brought with Southeastern Legal Foundation. As a mom of 3 girl athletes myself, I am amazed that something so illogical is even a question we are discussing today, much less the women's rights issue of our day. Frankly, I've been even more amazed and disappointed that so many women and supposed feminists are willing to let women and girls be ignored, shut down, and replaced by men and boys posing as female. Our rights are genuinely being eroded, but not from Trump or the right, from this tyranny that we are facing on the left. Suddenly, my sex became their cosplay, and it was not only allowed, it was championed by the left. In a now viral exchange during last week's arguments, Justice Alito pressed the ACLU for a definition of sex, to define what it means to be a boy or a girl, a man or a woman. And the ACLU's attorney could not provide a definition to the court, which makes it awfully difficult for the courts to determine if discrimination happened on the basis of something that couldn't be defined. Well, at Moms for Liberty, we know what a woman is. And as Tina Deskovich, CEO of Moms for Liberty, stated, we will fight to protect that truth until our last breath, for our daughters, our families, our country, and the future of civilization. Class dismissed.